Hi, my name is Laura, and I am a proud member of CMHA Windsor-Essex County Branch team. I was given the opportunity to share a video about what makes me feel physically and mentally well for Spirit Week leading up to this year's virtual ride down high. I am a baker. I've been baking since childhood, and in my 20s I discovered that baking is a wonderful way to relieve stress and focus on something other than life's nuances. The result is something wonderful and delicious that can be shared and bring joy to others, which in turn brings joy and satisfaction to me. Baking is something that intimidates many people, and today I'm going to show you how easy it actually is. With some patience and a few tips, I hope to inspire those who have feared the art of baking to give it a go and make some magic happen in their kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make a small batch chocolate chip cookie recipe. This is my go-to recipe, and it doesn't have to be strictly chocolate chip cookies. You can add whatever your imagination can conjure up into this recipe, and it should work well. It's my go-to fail-safe recipe. You're going to need a couple things in the kitchen to do this. Measuring cups, measuring spoons, they're very cheap. You can get them at the Dollarama or Walmart, whatever. A good set of measuring spoons and measuring cups, the cheap ones, will be suffice, and you will use them for everything you can do in the kitchen, not just baking chocolate chip cookies. I have a KitchenAid mixer, which I dearly love, and I use that always to bake. But today, due to the pandemic that we're all experiencing and homeschooling my child while working from home, I chose to use a bowl, the old-fashioned way, along with a wooden spoon, and a spatula is always helpful. The first thing we're going to need in this recipe is butter. Always use butter, 100% real butter that was made from a cow's cream. If you use margarine or any other butter substitute, it just doesn't taste as good. If you want the tastiest cookies, use butter. If a recipe calls for margarine, replace it with the same amount of butter. Trust me, you will thank me. So we have a half a cup of butter here. It's room temperature. As you can see, a knife slices through it easily, but not to the point that it's melted. You don't want melted butter. That will change the consistency of the cookies. So we'll put that in the bowl. An easy thing to remember when measuring butter is that all pounds of butter come with this handy little measuring guide on the side. Each pound of butter equals 2 cups. So therefore, 1/4 of a pound of butter is half a cup. So back to the grade school fractions that I just went through with my 10-year-old, the key is on the side of the butter. No need to scoop it into a measuring cup. You just slice where you need it. So into the butter, I'm going to add 3/8 of a cup of white granulated sugar. Just the sugar that you put in your coffee is fine. It doesn't have to be anything special. And we're going to kind of start pounding the butter into the sugar because it is room temperature. It's not melted, so it's not going to just mix right in. So now we've got the white sugar really starting to incorporate with the butter. It doesn't have to be 100% because we're going to add brown sugar to the mix. So as you can see, it's become a uniform concoction here. Then we're going to take 3/8 of a cup of brown sugar. Dump that in and start working the brown sugar in the same way we've done the white. This really helps de-stress when you have to pound the sugar into the butter. It's wonderful. If you ever get a little tiny lump in your brown sugar, you can just pound that out with a spoon. I've had times where my brown sugar will have a large lump in it that gets quite hard. That's just a natural thing that brown sugar does. There's nothing wrong with the sugar itself. It's just hardened over time. What you can do to fix that is take a piece of bread and throw it into your sugar container or sugar bag, and it will, within a day, soften all of that brown sugar up so it can be pliable and usable again. Okay, so now we've got the brown sugar and the white sugar incorporated with the butter, and then we're going to make it a little more user-friendly by adding an egg. Don't crack the egg right into the bowl, because 9 times out of 10 you will get an eggshell in there. And when you are trying to fish out an eggshell from some slimy cookie batter, it's a little bit difficult at times. So my go-to, take the egg, crack it into a separate bowl, and then put the egg in your batter once you realize there is no shells in there. Nobody wants a crunchy shell in their chocolate chip cookie. So then you're gonna beat that egg into it. And as you can see, it's starting to become more pliable. Got to put a little elbow grease in this. And once it becomes smooth, where you can see there's no yolk sitting on top of the batter, it's all incorporated nicely, then you're ready to add some vanilla. Vanilla is a very wonderful ingredient. Many things I bake involve vanilla. My advice, 100% real vanilla extract. If you can't get the real, then the artificial will work. I suggest not doubling, but tripling the amount of vanilla you're using if you're using artificial. If you're using regular vanilla extract, the real deal, double the amount of vanilla, because the amount of vanilla that recipes call for just never is enough. And if you want that extra kick, that extra love in your chocolate chip cookies, you want to put the real deal in there and double the amount. So this small batch recipe calls for a half a teaspoon. I'm going to use a teaspoon today. Maybe even a little tad more, some extra love. So get that vanilla nice and incorporated, and then we'll be ready for the flour, and we'll almost be ready to add the good stuff. Okay, so you can see it's a workable mixture. It's all incorporated. You're going to take 1 1/8 cup of flour and add half a teaspoon of baking soda. Not baking powder, because that will do something different to your cookies. You've got to make sure you're using the right leavening agent. So baking soda, and like I said, half a teaspoon. A lot of cookie recipes will call for salt. If you are using salted butter, which I have done today, then do not add the extra salt. Your cookies will come out very salty. I use the salted butter, no need for the extra salt. If I was using unsalted butter, which I do as well, then I would add the extra salt. So just take the baking soda that you've added into the flour and just kind of mix it around. Make sure it's evenly distributed so that when you put it into your wet ingredients, the baking soda is distributed thoroughly through the mix. So I'm going to add now some of my flour. Start mixing that in. A little bit more. You want to add it in small amounts, because when you add the entire amount of flour, it gets to be very difficult to mix in. Now that that's incorporated, we'll add the remaining and get that in there. So when the flour is almost incorporated in and it gets a little hard to get in there, this would be a good time to just take your spatula, scrape the dough that's on your wooden spoon. It has served its purpose at this point. Toss the wooden spoon, and then you're going to use the spatula for the rest of this recipe. Scrape down the sides of the bowl. Nobody wants a piece of baking soda or flour that hasn't been incorporated into their cookie. It's a bit of a tangy bite. It's not enjoyable. All right, so we've got our nice incorporated mixture. And now we're gonna add the good stuff, chocolate chips. Never skimp on the chocolate chips. That is just a bad move. Chocolate chip cookies were meant to be loaded with chips. So if a recipe calls for a 1/4 cup, you probably want to put half, etc. So I'm putting in a full cup of chocolate chips into the small batch. I'm going to fold them in with my spatula. And because we're all stuck at home and there's no such thing as school or nut-free facilities in your own home, we're going to put nuts in there today. Normally I don't put nuts in my son's cookies I send to school with him, but because I can, I'm going to. So I've got a 1/4 cup of pecans, ground very finely. I'm just going to throw them in there, and that'll just give it an extra layer of love. And the same way you mix the chocolate chips in, get those in there. And I totally think that I forgot to tell you to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. So my apologies. If I forgot to tell you that, please go turn your oven on now. And then shortly, once it's heated up, you will be able to bake these cookies. Just realizing that, so my apologies. You need to have a hot oven for the cookies. And now that we've got this all mixed, I will be with you shortly after I tidy up a little bit, and I'll show you how to put them on the pan, and we'll get them in the oven, and hopefully I can show you the finished product, which should be fantastic as they usually turn out. Okay, so now we're gonna put this deliciousness on the pan and get it in the oven so the oven can work its magic and we will have cookies, I hope. If you are an avid baker or want to really get into baking, I highly recommend getting scoops, especially for your drop cookies. It makes things very easy. Everything ends up uniform, but most people don't have this lying around in their kitchen drawer. So today we're going to do it with the old teaspoon. So you want to grab about a teaspoon of dough and just kind of give it a light roll in your hands. You don't want it to smush it down and make it a compact ball, because then it will have problems spreading in the oven. So if you take, just a teaspoon of dough, try to make them around the same size, but really who cares? They all go in the same place. They taste good. And just get your little balls of magic on your baking sheet. You want to keep them about 2 inches apart because they will spread. I use parchment on my baking sheet. I find it to be a wonderful tool in the kitchen. If you don't have parchment, you can put them right on the baking sheet. Non-stick baking sheets are just fine. It's just a little less cleanup after the fact, and it saves a little time in the kitchen. And all right, there's our first batch ready to go in the oven. You're going to put that in your preheated 375 degree oven for about 7 minutes. So my timer has gone off. I have taken my cookies out of the oven. They look fantastic. I let them sit on top of the stove for a few minutes just so that they harden up a little bit so we can transfer them to the cooling rack. So we're just going to slide these guys off. Oh, they look delicious. And a cooling rack isn't 100% necessary. You could let your cookies cool on the pan. It just takes longer. The cooling rack allows for the airflow to get through. Then you can eat them a little sooner because you won't burn your mouth. Okay, so there you have it. Our chocolate chip cookies with the addition of pecans, just because that's what I was in the mood for. In front, I have the cookies that I made earlier after the first take that the video wasn't recording the whole time. So to these, I have added white chocolate and chocolate chunks and hazelnuts. This is just an example of some of the different add-ins you can use in this recipe. Like, you can virtually add anything. Just make sure that it doesn't equate to more than 1 cup of chips of some type, and a 1/4 cup of nuts. And you want the nuts to be ground nice and fine so that they really disperse throughout and enhance the flavor throughout the whole cookie. So we have salted caramel chips, caramel bits. What are these? Cinnamon chips, M&Ms. There's peanut butter chips, white chips, chocolate chunks. The possibilities are endless with this cookie. I probably wouldn't recommend adding raisins or anything because that's a whole another level with oatmeal raisin cookies. And I don't know that I'll be doing a video on those. I think this is a one-time deal. But thank you for watching. I hope you try this because it really is easy and it's amazing when you make something like that and you can share it with your family and your friends and just show the love through some deliciousness. It's a wonderful thing and it's a stress reliever, and that's it. Thank you for watching my chocolate chip cookie tutorial. Certainly out of my comfort zone, certainly not something I would have thought to do on my own. I appreciate CMHA reaching out to me and asking me to do that because it gave me a little bit of a challenge during these times to step out of the box. And absolutely, we're all struggling. Doesn't matter if you're educating your child from home or unemployed and worried about your income, or employed and worried about being on the front lines. We're all going through stuff, and certainly I think at the end of the day we all just have to remember, love yourself, because if you can't love yourself, then how are you going to push through this whole pandemic? So thank you again, and I will try to remember to love myself if you can remember to love yourself.